Hello, have you ever dreamed of painting your walls with intricate patterns using a stencil, but hesitated, thinking it was beyond your skills? Well, worry no more. This step-by-step guide will empower you to unleash your creativity and master the art of wall stenciling, turning any room into a personalized masterpiece. Let's begin with what you will need. To start, you will need a 4-inch dense foam roller and a tray. You will need a paper plate or a plastic plate, and it will need lots of paper towels because once you load the paint onto the roller, you need to get rid of some of the paint, otherwise you'll have bleed through on the stencil. You need paint. You don't need a lot of paint. A sample size will cover a whole wall easily. These sample paints will come in eggshell. You want to work in either flat or eggshell paint, not gloss, because it will bleed and it will take forever to dry. For the corners and the baseboard and the ceiling, you need a stencil brush. This one is 5/8 of an inch. You need 2-inch painter's tape. You need a tape measure to try and find approximately the center of the room, which is where you'll start the stenciling. There are 2 ways to level. You can either use a handheld or, to make life easier, it's definitely easier to use a laser level. Then you will need some temporary spray adhesive to help keep the stencil flat on the wall. And this is optional. When you're done with the stencil, you can remove the paint if you want to keep the stencil. Or if you do a lot of stenciling with the same stencil, you will have paint buildup, and that'll cause bleeding. So you might have to stop and spray the stencil, put it either in a garbage bag or you can put it in the bag that came with your stencil and let it sit for 30 minutes and then give it a good scrub with an old brush in a large sink or a bathtub so that you have a clean stencil. Once you've picked the wall or walls that you want to paint, make sure your walls are clean and smooth. If you plan on changing the paint color of your wall, allow the paint to completely dry before starting to stencil. I would not recommend a gloss or semi-gloss paint, as these paints will bleed and take too long to dry. I would recommend a flat or eggshell paint, but an alternative could be chalk paint, though you'll be more limited in your color selection. Next, use painter's tape to tape off the baseboard, corners, and ceiling and protect your floors. Find the center of your wall by measuring from corner to corner and from ceiling to baseboard, and make a small pencil mark to denote the center of the wall. Next, get your stencil and put a small piece of painter's tape on the top of the stencil. Then turn the stencil face down and spray a thin layer of temporary adhesive on the back. Eyeball the center of the stencil to the center of your wall, and then use a level to make sure the stencil is straight on your wall. This is the only step that is vital, because if your stencil is crooked to start, your whole wall will look crooked. If you have a laser level, it makes it much easier to ensure your stencil is straight. Once you are satisfied that your stencil is straight, add some more pieces of painter's tape to adhere the stencil to your wall. You can also rub the stencil with your hand or use a speedball soft rubber brayer to ensure that the stencil is as flat as possible. Pour a small amount of paint into your painter's tray and load your foam roller with paint. This is where the paper towels come in. Put a double folded paper towel on a disposable plate and offload any excess paint. In stenciling, less is more. I know it seems counterintuitive, but you want your roller to seem almost dry to the touch to prevent bleeding. It is better to do more light coats than one heavy one. Gently begin to roll the roller over the stencil using light pressure to gently apply a thin coat of paint. If it is a white wall and you're rolling a darker color, you'll need less paint than if it's a dark colored wall where you're rolling a lighter paint color. Patience is key. Take your time and the finished product will be the better for it. Lift up an edge of the stencil to check how your progress is going. Then continue to apply light coats until you're satisfied with the result. Remove the stencil and use the registration marks that are built into the stencil to line up the next stencil. It doesn't matter if you go up or down or left or right, whatever you fancy. If you feel your stencil is not sticking to the wall, spray another thin layer of temporary adhesive on the back of the stencil. And repeat. Now let's talk about what to do when you reach the edge of the wall. This is when the stencil brush comes into play. First, place your stencil as usual, and then use the foam roller to complete the portion of the stencil that's actually flush to the wall. Then once you get close to the corners and the stencil is no longer flush, or the roller no longer fits, grab your stencil brush. Dip your stencil brush into the paint and offload most of the paint using the paper towel. Again, it will look as if you don't have enough paint on the brush, but you do, I promise. Then, using a gentle tapping motion, fill in the parts of the stencil close to the wall. Remember, patience is key. Less paint is more. Reload the brush as necessary. Try to keep the brush as perpendicular to the wall as possible while tapping. Don't tilt the brush up or down. Try and keep the handle of the brush parallel to the floor. Repeat this process with the ceiling and the baseboards. If you don't wish to reuse your stencil in the future, you can cut your stencil using scissors when only the ceiling and the baseboard remain to make the stencil less cumbersome.